All right. Hey, good morning. Hope everybody's well. I'm not even sure what day it is. It's Wednesday, I think. That holiday kind of thing kind of messes you up a little bit. It's like I'm not sure, but yeah, it's Wednesday. So hope all is well with you guys. And it is mine and the Tamsters' 43rd anniversary. So we celebrate that and just enjoy. Of course, we it's like not like we don't hang out all the time anyway, and enjoy being together. But man, it's been a good ride. And 43 years we've been hooking up, and kind of excited about it. So hope I live long enough to do a few more, and that's the plan. So hey, today we are jumping into children, and so we're kind of moving along. We're in the practical phase of Colossians. We're looking at one verse a day right now because it's just one line, but it's pregnant with all sorts of great possibilities of thought. So Paul is talking and has been stressing to the Colossians how they have to kind of leave the world, right? Put your mind and your heart in the heavenlies so that we can be effective on this planet. It used to be a statement that you can be so heavenly minded you're no earthly good. And we all bought into that. Hey, man, you can't just always be about Jesus. But these days, man, it's like we need to step out of the world and then so that we can affect it. And so this is exactly what Paul is teaching in this concept that you and me should be heavenly minded, right? That's where Christ is. So therefore, our heart should be there, our mind should be there. And then he says, on the basis of that, we ought to have some attitudes. So in a sense, you and me have to leave the world if we want to really affect the world. The problem with the American church today is that we didn't do that very effectively. So that instead of leaving the world, we invited them right into the church in that sense. And the church is meant to go to the world, not to bring the world into the church. That's the whole point is a purified church, right? The church that is pure and spotless and holy. And so, and that is the universal church. That is those of us who are believers in Christ. But the local expression of that, while we want to welcome all, you can't allow the world to have infiltrated it such that everything is watered down. And so we've done that in the church, and we've done that in our home as well. In too many areas, the Christian home doesn't look that much different than the worldly home, the home of the world. The divorce rate is the same. In some sense, the abuse rate is paralleling each other. So there's a lot of issues that are going on, which is why the Word of God feels so timeless in that sense. And so he reminds us of these attitudes that you and I should have. And then he's explained how those attitudes play themselves out in marriage and in family. And so I'm going to remind us of those attitudes because these are the attitudes that a husband should have toward his wife, and his wife should have toward her husband. It's the attitude the children should have toward their parents, and it is this: compassionate, right? That we should be compassionate. We want our kids' eyes up, right? When I say that, to me it means a lot, right? My eyes are up. My eyes aren't focused on myself. My eyes are focused on others. So compassion is really to see others, to sympathize and to empathize with others. That's compassion. So our children's eyes, just like the husband toward his wife and the wife toward her children, to her husband, the eyes of the children should be up, looking at their parents in that sense and at others. So we want our children to be compassionate and then to bring kindness to that situation. So that's the aspect. That's the legs of compassion, where you begin to do kind things to people in light of where they are in their station of life. There's also the aspect of humility. That is that we regard others as more important than ourselves. We don't think less of ourselves. We just think of ourselves less. That's a powerful little way to phrase it, meaning that I don't have to go, oh, I'm not as good as anybody else. That's not the point. You could be twice as good as everybody else. You could be twice as athletic, twice as everything. Humble simply means that you regard the other person as more important than yourself. You go into a relationship like that, it's a game changer in that sense. We should be gentle, not harsh, right? We're going to rein in our attitudes and our emotions. We're going to rein those in. We're going to be patient. We're going to be patient with the circumstances that come our way. We're going to be patient means to be unmoved by them. I'm not going to let the circumstances of life dictate whether I'm going to be gracious and joyful and loving and kind and at peace and at rest. Circumstances aren't going to disrupt that because I'm not taking my cue from whatever the world is doing or whatever's coming at me. I'm taking my cue from the fact that in Christ I have everything I need for life and godliness. So I can trust him fully. And then as it relates to forbearing, that is that people, I'm not going to be moved by them either. I'm not going to match anger for anger, yelling for yelling, abuse for abuse. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to respond in love. I'm going to do that to my enemies. I'm going to do that to my world. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. The Lord will deal with those other people. My job is simply to respond in a way that I don't let their attitude dictate how I respond to situations. And then we're going to be forgiving, right? We're just going to be quick to do that because God has forgiven us of everything. And we're going to wrap all that up in this concept of love. That all of that's going to be wrapped in love. And that's how we respond to that. Now, so we've looked at a wife and we've looked at a husband. So today we move into verse 20. And we're just going to look at this one thing. But before we do, I just want to remind us that a godly home starts with a godly marriage, right? I mean, it does. If you are a godly husband and your wife is a godly woman, then your chances of raising good kids grows exponentially to that. It really does. I don't mean good in the sense of rule-keeping, legalistic type stuff. Do-gooder. I don't mean that kind. I mean if you are a godly, that is, that you possess those 7 attitudes, and it is in your wheelhouse, and it is in the wife's wheelhouse, and it is in the husband's wheelhouse, you have exponentially a much better opportunity to raise a great home. And the home is the foundation of society. If you wonder why our society is as screwed up as it is today, and it is because the home is breaking down. Now, we could argue how that happened, that the powers above us systematically have sought to undermine, and they probably are that because they work for the world. They work for the evil one, right? He's at work in them. And so you should expect that the world is not going to want to embrace the reality of a home. But society, or the home, is the foundation of a society. So we have to guard ours. We can't take our cues about the family from the world. I can't do that. I can't afford to do that. And without sounding cold-hearted or anything, there's certain things that will disrupt the family. God meant for the family to be one man, one woman, united in marriage, one flesh, till death. Within that basis of a 2-parent household, great things can happen. I realize some of you may find yourself in a single-parent household. I'm not saying that you necessarily you've done anything wrong. I'm just advocating that God's order was a man and a woman together, and there is this co-parenting, right? And so single parenting is difficult, and so some of you it is what it is, but it's difficult. But some of you had choices and divorce and the rampant of that. And listen. You can go do studies all you want to about children and mental health and all of that. And there's what they call ACE, adverse childhood experiences, where there's been violence or neglect or divorce. There's so many things. It affects a child's life. If we wonder why are our kids struggling so much with these mental issues today, it can be because the environment in the home has created it. So let's don't blame everything on the world. The world has a lot, but we decide what happens in our home. So don't excuse what's happening in your kids' lives as though it's somehow the world. You're responsible for your children. And we're getting there. This is going to be a 3-day kind of deal just on parenting today, or this week. But I just want us to understand that. So the home is a foundation of a society. A great home, godly homes will build good, solid communities. Whether they're a godly community or not, we can't dictate. But we can influence where we can influence. And so we're at deficits in the sense of a single parenting, or these the overabundance of divorce rates among our society. Absent parents is another issue, right? You look at the plight of what's happening a lot in the black community. It has to do with a lot of parents being incarcerated in jail. And I'm not arguing that they deserve to be there. I think that's kind of the whole thing. The war against drugs created a problem there. And you may disagree with that. I'm just telling you, it's destructive to the home when you create that kind of an environment. So incarceration, substance abuse, it's at a rampant stage, and you get a mom or a dad or one of them underneath substance abuse and struggling with that, it's going to greatly impact the kids that you are bringing into this world. Emotional abuse and mental abuse that either the parent has incurred and then passes it along to the kids or whatever. But those are huge issues. Those are things that can be controlled inside the family, right? And so we should look there if we want to wonder why is the family unit breaking down like it is. There are societal abuses that we have to look at. It's no mystery today that our schools have taken a hard turn in a terrible direction of what they think is important to ingrain in our own kids' lives. And so a lot of parents are having to rethink government schools and whether that's where we want our kids to be. And I realize every little community is different. We've had some communities here, and I'd feel very comfortable in that sense, putting my kids in a government school. But there are other places I would like, man, I would do anything rather than that. There's bullying that happens, whether it's in the neighborhood, whether it's among your siblings, whether it's at school. But those things affect what goes on. There's meta distractions, the best way I can term it. When there's these escapisms, all these games that kids can fall into and escape from the reality of life, it distorts the very values that we want in our kids. It distorts compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness. It's all based on everything opposite of those things. And I'm not advocating against the games. I'm just simply saying you have to look at that. Isolation can do the same thing. There can be such a thing as being too isolated. Your kids feeling isolated. Doesn't mean that there's not people around them. You know what it's like to be lonely, to feel lonely even though you're not alone. And so it's the isolation. And again, without sounding, like I'm leaning one way or the other, I think the way we overmasked our kids for so long creates a lot of that feeling of isolation. And so we're going to reap the benefit. I mean, the aspect of that. There's friendships and allowing your kids to have friendships with the wrong people. Bad company corrupts good morals. My dad drilled that into me. And so these are issues that we should see happening. Peer pressure, and all that takes place, and seeing what happens when kids feel that pressure to simply try to fit in. So they'll do things that they know inherently is wrong, but they do it because they want to fit in. These are all the things that parents are up against these days. And it's not new. We've had that. Immorality is being pushed from every corner now. You can't turn on a TV without seeing sinful relationships and immorality. You can't. You can hardly go to a movie and see that. You see it everywhere. It's being pushed in our schools, in the norm of everything. It's just pushed that way. So we're supposed to accept that. That's what happens when you decide you're going to have an all-inclusive society. This is what happens. And so we have to deal with that. And then you just got the world, the idiocy, just the craziness of the world. So that's kind of an umbrella of thoughts as we settle into, we've looked at the role of wives should be submissive. That is to line up under her husband. That will generate respect in his life, which will have a great trickle effect on you. And a husband who is loving toward his wife is good, to sacrifice, to help bring her holy, to cherish her. And that attitude toward his wife will have a great trickle-down effect from her to him. That's how marriage works. Now he's moved into the area of children, and he says this, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. That's the deal. And so let's just break that down. Children, what kind of children? Techna. That word, it means those under authority. So that really almost extends to 18, 20, 22. Listen, if they're living under your roof and they're not providing for themselves yet because, they're in college or whatever, or they're still in high school, that's the umbrella of children. When one moves out and either falls into their own responsibility, or marriage or whatever, then they cease to. They're always your child, but they cease to be your children, your responsibility in that sense. And so he says, that's what he says. Children, those who are underneath the authority of their parents, obey them, right? That obey, upokoete, it simply means to hear under, right? To sit under and listen. That's what that means. To be a mentor, to be a sponge in that sense. To you know how we say I sat under them as a teacher. That's where the root of that word comes from. It means to look up attentively, like you're paying attention when your parents speak. It means to respond positively, not non-defiant. It means you go, okay. Doesn't mean you're not asking questions, but it simply means your posture is that you want to listen very attentively with the intent to do what is told that you should do. And he says to do this in everything. In everything, right? It's a call to humility. A kid should do that no matter what his parents are saying. Honor your mother and father. That is to live under their rules. That means to embrace those rules. Whether you agree with those rules or not, you embrace those rules. The only outside inference of that would be if your parents are telling you to do something that is sinful and wrong in that sense. Other than that, this is what God requires of our kids who live under our roof. Why? Because it pleases the Lord. And listen, if you are living a life that pleases the Lord, you're going to have no troubles in this life. Not from that vantage point. You may have persecution. You may have other things. We're told that's going to happen. But and so this is what he says. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. I don't know if I need to make this statement publicly or not, but that's not a natural inclination. Have you noticed that? Your kids don't just grow up going, hey, here I am, and I'm ready and willing to be obedient. No, they're not. They're dirty, rotten, stinking little sinners, and they're selfish slobs, and they want what they want, and so they yell and scream and kick until they get it, right? Just like a lot of adults who never learned this concept of self-control. It is a learned behavior. Obedience is a learned behavior. I was told I did a lot of camp work, and I spent some summers at a camp, and there was an old man down there. We called him Samson, and I was responsible for horses some of the weeks that I was down there. And he was explaining to me how you break horses, that you can do so by letting them be stallions and then have to bring them in, and you have to crack the whip, you have to get on them, they buck and all of that until they finally settle down and get to work. He said, or you could simply, when they come out of the womb, you keep them on a short leash for certain amounts of time a day, just a short leash, because you're teaching them self-control. He said, and then you can lengthen that leash over time and the time off the leash. And if you do that in a balanced way, you never have to break the horse. And you think in terms of parenting, it's a powerful example. If we just let our kids go crazy and then go, oh, wow, what's going on? And they're 9, 10 years old, it's going to be like breaking a stallion. But if you've been delivering and demanding obedience at an early age, it's a learned behavior. They're better kids on the other end. And so, in fact, Titus chapter 2, we all have to be trained in certain things. That's why he says older women should train the younger women to do what? To love their husbands. That doesn't come naturally. So you have to practically, what does it look like? And older women go, well, here's how you love your husband. This is what it looks like. How do you love your children, right? Not because you don't love them, but because it comes hard sometimes. And here's how the older women would teach that: to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home. That's not a normal inclination, but yet that's your domain. To be kind, to be subject to husbands, right? And then he says, similarly, encourage the young men. The same thing. You know what he says? The women had like 7 things they needed to grab a hold of. The young women, the young men, self-control. Just one thing. Hey, just try to rein in your emotions. Just try to rein in your craziness, right? Let's just kind of put a lid on it. That's what he's speaking of there. And so in order for those things to happen, you need to begin to look at what it looks like to be a good example. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow and what those examples look like. I just want to kind of lay this foundation today for us in our thought process before we jump into the practical aspects of how we can find ways to help us with this throughout the scriptures. Man, Lord bless you guys. Have a great day. And man, Lord willing, I'm going to see you in the morning.